Welcome to Lockbox, a podcast providing real estate professionals with action items for success. My name is Jeffrey Brogger, and I'm going to be your host. I'm the founder of two real estate marketing and tech companies, STEEZY.Digital and realnurture.io. In this podcast, you'll learn from top 1% real estate and mortgage brokers the exact secrets to their success. Welcome to Lockbox. Hello, welcome to Lockbox. My name is Jeffrey Brogger, and I'm here today with Oleg Tkach. Oleg, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you start off by telling our listeners who you are, where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm a mortgage lender in the Seattle, Washington area, and been originating mortgages for 17 years now. Have a pretty large team. It's me and pretty much 16 other team members, and team is broken up into three parts. We call them LP1s, which is your initial, lead intake people that take the initial calls, responses to the emails, get the process started. Second part is the pre-approval side. So we call them pre-approval managers. And pretty much what they do is pre-approve clients all day long. And the third part is just contract to close. We call them LP2s. It's somebody that takes a file once it's officially sold, ready to go. It's a real deal, and they take it to the finish line. And basically, that's how we're structured. I'm the only originator on the team. On average, we close about, or the last 2 years, I should say, we close about 800 plus transactions a year, over 300 million in volume. Most of my business is from referral partnerships that I've established throughout the years with agents, financial planners, CPAs, just other people in the industry that have a sphere of influence, and then past clients as well. That's kind of my main lead generation source, I should say, month in, month out. So yeah, that's pretty much a little bit about me. I pretty much eat, sleep, breathe mortgages. That's the best way to put it. Okay.
Well, great. Yeah, you covered a lot there, and we'll dive in deeper on some of those topics. But what first got you into real estate and mortgage? It seems like, prior to this podcast, you mentioned you're in your mid-30s, and you said that you've been a loan officer for 17 years. So that means that right at 18, if I'm doing my math right, you were introduced to this and stuck with it. So what was that first story of the experience like, oh, I could do this, right?
Yeah.
What exposed you to real estate?
Yeah, so I come from a family of blue collar workers, right? And at the end of the day, I just picked early on, I realized I'm good in sales, just naturally good at sales. I never found anything I used to do door-to-door sales as a kid when I used to work for a guy who used to build, sports, different sports figures and all that. And so what I did was when I was 16, I got a job at GameStop, and it's because no one would hire me in the fast food industry. I don't know why. I tried and no one would hire me. And so I used to, play a lot of video games as a kid growing up, like a lot of us, right? And so there was a GameStop that opened up, and I decided, hey, I'm going to give it a shot. And so I got the interview. I landed the job. Well, little did I know that it was seasonal. And so long story short, I'm standing there, me and two other people, and they're like, well, so this is, for the next 2 months, and only one person is going to end up keeping a permanent position. Any questions? And I raise my hand and I go, yeah, I have a question. What determines who stays? And they're like, oh, it's simple. It's whoever sells the most magazine subscriptions and game reservations, they stay. And so it was like, all right, that's the mission. That's what I'm going to go after. And so a month into my, sales associate career at GameStop, the general manager or the regional manager stopped by. He takes me in the back room. He goes, I need to talk to you. And I'm thinking I'm getting let go. And he goes, how are you doing it? And I'm like, doing what? He's like, well, right now in the state of Washington, you're, of all the GameStops, you're number 2 in game reservations and subscriptions. However, you're a part-time employee, and the guy that's ahead of you is working, overtime. He's like, so per hours worked, you're by far beating everybody. And I'm like, my instant response was, does this mean I get to keep my job? And he's like, yes, you do. And how old are you? And I was 16 at the time. He's like, I want to promote you. And that's pretty much how it happened. At that point, it was like I got this instant hey, I'm good in sales. At the same time, too, I always wanted to get into banking. And so at that point, I got into a position at a bank as a courier, went into a teller, and then I find out there's loan officers at banks that do lending and it's professional and they're meeting with clientele and everything. And it was like at that point, I was like, that's what I want to do. And
Mm.
so there was a job ad for junior loan officers in the paper. I called them up and it was pretty much a telemarketer position. And I didn't know it at the time, but I went on an interview and sold myself, as you can imagine, and got hired on as a telemarketer at like 17 and a half, where I was making cold calls for lenders. And I made an agreement that I will only, come on board with them if, as soon as I turn 18, they'll let me be my own LO. And they agreed, said, hey, if you're a good dialer, as soon as you turn 18, sure enough, we'll let you be an LO. And that's pretty much how it happened. And
Awesome.
yep, that's the story.
You must be saying, after now being there 17 years, being, number 21 in the nation out of 750,000 LOs, you must be saying, thank God that fast food restaurant didn't hire me.
Yeah. And, honestly, too, and I always think about the interview that I almost passed up for the telemarketer position, because I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be a telemarketer. Like, I'm working at a bank. I'm doing good. And this and that. But yeah, I think about that from time to time. Like, what would my what would my life look like if I didn't get into lending, right? Because as soon as I got in, I mean, I was passionate about it from day one. Right when I found, a few years into it, I found out there's a top 200 list in the country, and we're ranked like, officially. And I'm like, I got to be on that list. Like, what does it take?
Right.
Start studying the people on there. What are they doing? And it opened up this. It almost became like a game all of a sudden of how do I get there, and can I get there? And I remember my life mission was like, get there in your 20s, and that's all I wanted to do, is be on that list in my 20s. And so yeah, that's when it was like game on.
I love that. Do you still game?
My kids game, and I only with them, but on my own I don't.
Yeah. I used to be obsessed, play video games till my eyes were literally red blood, like just boom. I looked like a freaking alien, my mom said one time. The first time I got like a Nintendo 64, and then like went to PlayStation, then Xbox and Xbox 360. And it was just like, by the time that Xbox transitioned to Xbox 360, that was my last system. And I'm grateful for that. Like I stopped playing at that time in like middle of high school, but it created this mentality. Like, I always did sports as well. It's this competitive nature, when you're doing a first person shooter or any type of game where you rack up experience and you level up, it really creates that competitive nature. And so I know what you mean by that. Like, you look at numbers and being in the top standings, and then, okay, well, what's it going to take to get there? What's the formula? Like, what's the cheat code, right? To get there faster, better.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it unlocks some really interesting neural pathways that you can then apply to other areas of life, which obviously you have. So that's awesome. You mentioned, go ahead.
Real quick, it's interesting that you say that, because, and the reason why I don't play video games right now, the true reason is because life is a game, right? And I feel like if I'm there playing video games, I mean, if I'm spending time with my kids, it's one thing, but if I'm playing video games, I'm not doing a workout, or I'm not reading a book, I'm not advancing myself, right? And when you really do what you love to do, and you build the life you want around you, life is truly a game. That's really what it comes down to. And so I'd rather play the game of life than a video game. That's really what it is. So it's not because, hey, I'm just not interested and I want to watch TV. It's hey, I'd rather play the real life game.
Right. And level up in that game.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So what I was going to transition to was regarding, your transaction volume, and then asking some advice for an LO that is doing well. Because if you're doing 800 transactions a year, that's obviously top in the nation. But what about the LO that's doing 200 and that they're now thinking, okay, I've established myself at 200 transactions a year. I obviously want to level up. What should they focus on, or what advice should they ignore in order to get to that next 300 or 400 transactions?
So I would say is you really have to understand the very, very, very simple formula of mortgage. That to me is, and what I live by is the number of leads times your conversion rate equals deals closed. As simple as that. Number of leads, that's your prospecting output. Everybody does something different, and I don't think it necessarily matters. You got to do what works for you. For, again, whatever you do prospecting wise is what is generating the number of leads. Your conversion rate now, it has to do with your team and you. How good are you once that person comes through the door? What do your systems look like to get to closing? And conversion, I mean lead to paycheck, right? Like that's the true conversion that you got to track. So if you're in the industry, the average conversion, if somebody truly tracks and you track all your leads, the average conversion is about 15 to 20%. If you're really good at what you do, you're looking at about 25%. If you're like a pro's pro and you're operating at the highest level, you're about 30%. That means that 1 out of every 3 people you're getting a paycheck on that call you. That's pretty impressive. So the reason why I bring that up is that the more leads you get, the lower your conversion is. The more you're involved in the process, the higher your conversion is, yet the less involved you are in generating leads, which means that your leads will drop off. So you have to build your business around, where do you want to put yourself? Do you want to put yourself more on the lead gen side, or do you want to put yourself more into the conversion part of it? And understanding that leads go up, conversion goes down, conversion goes up, leads go down. And once you understand that, there's a sweet spot where you get to, like our conversion has been right around between 25 to 30%, depending on the year. Our leads are anywhere between 2 to 3,000, depending on the year. And so for me, I noticed that I have a lot more fun in the lead gen side than the conversion side. And so it's now, if that's the case, that means that I got to hire the best people around me, right? The best team members I can, the most experienced, because I'm not as involved in that side. Therefore, I got to make sure that the people that are converting at the highest level possible, right? So I would say the advice that I'd give anybody looking at how do you go for 200 to 400 or for 200 to 800 is really understand where you are on a day-to-day basis. Are you on the green time lead gen side, or are you in the red conversion side? And depending on where you are, decide, what do I want my business to look like? How many leads do I need to get? Where are those leads coming from? So for example, if somebody says, well, I want to close 500 transactions a year and I'm going to be at 25% conversion. I need 2,000 leads a year. Where are those leads coming from, right? And then the question is, depending on the categories, like, past clients, past client referrals, business partners, builders, real estate agents, financial planners, ads that you might be doing online, whatever, right? You got to ask yourself, where are they coming from? Then the question is, what is your strategy behind each source, right? And it's not going to happen overnight, but pick 1 or 2 sources and focus on those for the next 6 months, next year, and really perfect those. Get those established. You really ultimately, if you want to have a very, very solid, predictable business, you want to have 4 sources of leads coming in. You want to have 4. And you want to play, in my opinion, in the 75% green time, 25% red time is really where you want to be. And you want to watch yourself, track yourself, and really pay attention to that, because most salespeople, at the end of the day, most salespeople are pretty damn lazy, right? Most people don't want to make the hard calls. Most people kind of want to avoid it. They kind of want to do the bare minimum, just kind of how we're wired, right? So you really want to almost be robotic in your execution and be super tactical and not emotional about it, and just execute it one day at a time, and not pay too much attention to the numbers. Because the problem with salespeople is, when the numbers are good, they let the foot off the gas. When the numbers are bad, they panic and they overdo it, right? You don't want to be in one or the other. What you want to be is just constantly running the play, constantly running the play.
Such good advice. I really appreciate you being generous with your overall description of how someone could level up. And a big focus of that was lead gen. You mentioned you're more of a lead gen person, and then the other side is conversion. I think we're going to have a very fascinating conversation because, I'm a lead gen guy as well. I have a company that has a system, we call it prospect, nurture, retain. We want to help, MLOs and real estate brokers to prospect, meaning lead generation. Let's get you more leads, primarily from digital marketing, digital advertising. That's really how we do most of our lead gen. And then what are the best sources to then nurture those, not let that lead slip through the cracks, right? That's not a referral. This lead needs to be nurtured, and they need to have value built in you and build trust with you before they're really actually going to convert. And what are the best systems out there in order to accomplish that, right? So then there's the nurture phase. But then once you convert them, and you're at that 15, 20% conversion rate, okay, well, how do you now multiply that single deal into 2, 3, 5 over the next 5 or 10 years by building the relationship and retaining that client? And so I'm curious, when you're talking about being a lead generation guy and having 4 sources, you mentioned a couple in the very beginning of the show, saying you're big on referrals and you have relationships with certain businesses or real estate professionals. But I'm curious what your most profitable lead generation source is other than referrals. And then I have some follow-up questions on that.
Here's my take on it. In the beginning of your career, it's all about lead gen systems, meaning you got to buy leads, you got to invest into mailing to people that don't know you, calling on people that don't know you. Like, you're establishing your name ultimately. Once you get to a certain point, like you talked about, you get to a point where now it's more of retention. And that person now starts referring you. And then the whole focus has to shift to, how do I keep getting referred by the people that I've done business with? Because once you've done enough transactions with enough people, then at that point, you're only adding a few strong new referral partners a year, because you're retaining the ones that you already have. So the ones that you're adding are probably the ones replacing the ones that you're losing, if you're not in a massive growth mode, like growth mode zone. So to answer your questions, like what were my most, profitable the ones when I got into the mortgage career? One thing I like to do is really target marketing with mailers that I've done in the past. And I would mail to a certain, demographic that had a certain loan. And I would just be dialed with what my script was to them on the phone when they called in and all that, right? In addition to that, I've purchased many leads before in the past through different, online sources. And, with online leads, you're right, there is no trust in the beginning. So you have to overdo it, right? It's not hey, I was told that I worked with your, brother, or, you worked with my brother, and now, he said you're the man, and you said he's going to take care of, you were going to take care of me. What do I need to do? When it's an online lead, you have to understand, like, you cannot be emotional about the lead. They don't know you. They're not going to prioritize picking up your phone call. They're not going to so you just have to constantly be in front of them. The beauty of it now today with technology and with the different CRMs out there, you could build out campaigns that could pretty much do everything until a client responds, and then you jump in and you're at your best, right? Whereas in the past with me, I had to make every call manually. I had to send every text manually. That 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that really didn't exist, right? And so, for me, it was, in the beginning, it was do as many mailers as you can targeted, buy as many online leads, pour as much back into your business as you can, working with companies like yours. And then it's, how do I, if somebody says no or doesn't work with me, the question is why? And then you change up your script, you change up your approach, you change up your value proposition, and you'll realize that with every different lead source, they're going to want to hear different things. They need to be sold differently. You can't sell the same. If you're selling your online leads the same way as you're selling your, referrals that are coming in, one is you might scare off the hot referrals. 2 is you might come across too cold to the online leads, right? So I would say definitely you want to invest into yourself from a standpoint, study the reactions that you're getting, and don't be afraid to change things up until you get it dialed. And I'll share a little bit more what I mean by that. I remember my first mailer that I did, I sent it out to 20,000 people. I closed 0 transactions out of it. The second one that I did, I closed 0 transactions out of it. And once I cracked the formula of how to close somebody that's calling in that doesn't know you at all, I remember it was month 3, I closed 2 or 3. And then month 4, same mailer, nothing has changed because the calls were coming in. Month 4, it was 18 transactions. And it was just because I cracked the formula of what it takes to land somebody that's calling you cold.
Right.
And so that's what I would say is you want to continue changing your approach when it comes to different lead gen sources that are coming in, for sure.
That makes sense. And really phenomenal breakdown of the difference between a hot referral to an online lead. And I explain that to my clients that this type of lead that my agency helps generate and specializes in, the reason why we came up with the middle portion, the nurture, was based on feedback and me noticing what was happening once we handed off the lead to the client. It just started out mainly as digital marketing and lead generation, but I then understood from my background in sales, gosh, the fortune's in the follow-up, right? That's the age-old saying, and everyone also hates doing the follow-up. So why don't we build out professionally copywritten emails, SMS text campaigns, Facebook Messenger campaigns? Why don't we automate the process after the lead's generated, have an inside sales agent call them 3 times in the first minute, text them, and then have a 28 touch campaign in the first year in order to get them to the point where now they actually are ready to have the phone conversation with the real estate professional.
Yep.
Now, previously in the early part of my agency, we were handing it off too soon and expecting too much of the agent who didn't have the skills or the training at that time to convert this type of lead. They were used to, when a lead comes in, hey, my brother did a transaction with you, you're the man. Okay, awesome. Let's go see houses, or what's your property? Let's go list it. Or, okay, let's go do a loan, right? There's immediate trust there. So I began to obsess over and specialize in how do we automate systems that not only build trust for one client, but then be able to quickly onboard other clients in other markets that want to do the same thing and have it be successful in other markets too. And so that's been my, big obsession over the last 4 or 5 years. And, we do well at it now. And at the end, I like how you talked about this secret sauce, this formula that you discovered through 2 mail campaigns where you were having tons of conversations and not converting. And then all of a sudden the same input of the mail campaign generating the same amount of calls. And then all of a sudden you went from 2 transactions the 3rd month to 18 the 4th month. So I don't want to forget about that. Let's dive into a little bit of that secret sauce on this type of lead that calls in and they don't know you. You don't know them. Like, how are you fielding that call? What in your opinion is that secret sauce, if you're willing to share it?
Well, so you got to understand, what are you trying to sell, right? Like at that point, I was trying to sell a refi and trying to lower their monthly payment. And so for me, what I recognized is that the script that I used when they would call me to ask me, what is this? It changed from more of a Q&A to I was giving them information and programming them along the way, programming them that, here's what it takes to qualify this. Here's what the next steps are. Here's how we can lock you in, At the same time, too, you obviously have to create urgency when it's an online lead. You can't say, well, think about it and call me back, right? It's hey, listen, this is only going to take, 10 minutes to get locked in right now. I can run your credit over the phone right now. Let's get it done right now. And then it just keeps moving to the next step. It's stuff like, hey, do you want me to see if you qualify for this? Do you want to see if your credit score is high enough? Not, hey, are you committed to doing this today? But hey, let's see if your credit score is high enough. Okay, sure. We ran it. Hey, let's see if your income works. Okay, cool. All right. Hey, do you want me to lock in and send you disclosures? Right. And that's what it became, where I realized that if you try to get them on the phone a second time in that particular campaign, it was, you don't get off the phone. And if you get off the phone, it's a no. Otherwise, you pretty much want to pull credit, take a full app, lock, all on the phone with a needs list to their email. And then at that point, it's like, hey, I just want to let you know we're pretty much halfway to the finish line. One thing you'll realize is that most people are lazy. They don't want to start over something they already started. So the key is, if you feel as a client that you started something, most people are not going to restart somewhere else. Okay, so the goal is make sure they feel that they started the process, that phone call. I remember there's a study done by Zillow, and it was like, why did you work with who you worked with as a lender or agent? And there was like 20 different categories. Like one was, their knowledge. Two was their reviews. Three was years of experience. Four was, and it just kept going. And one of them was response time. And it was like over 80% of the people started working with whoever they worked with was because they picked up the phone. They responded quicker. And I remember for me, I remember sitting there and thinking, like, it doesn't matter how many loans I do, how great I am in the industry. It's not about me. And a lot of people sell themselves, right? It's about the client. Like I shouldn't be talking about me. I should be talking about them, their needs, all that. So I remember the key was make sure you pick up every single phone call. Don't get off that phone call until they're committed, right? And then at that point, it's how fast can you get to the point where they feel that they're almost there. So don't wait a couple of days to send disclosures, send them that night. And so once I got that down, that's when it became, I'm not just doing Q&A calls, which I was doing a lot of Q&A calls, and then go back to their lender and and they would already have all the information, and they'll say, hey, here's what I want to do, because they trust that person. It was along the Q&A on the way, we also scrubbed we pulled credit, we set everything up, we talked numbers, we went into details, we locked, we sent the stuff out. And that was the game changer. So depending on what you're selling and what you want to accomplish, I would say the biggest thing is, if you're a real estate agent and you're talking to an online lead, for you, it might be setting an in-person appointment. Like, don't get off the phone until you set an in-person appointment. Or, depending again, what you're selling, if you're an insurance agent, it might be, hey, I need them to send me this and this and this information, or I need to get this certain information to where I have enough to generate a legitimate quote for them that then I could follow up on and use as an anchor or a hook when I call and say, hey, we could save you, $3,800 a year or whatever, right? As a lender, it was, big on credit check. If they trust you enough to pull your credit. And I remember this when I was a dialer, we would only get paid when we would get a social security number. And going back to this, since you're talking about the process and we're diving deeper into that, I remember that on the application, the social security number's on the top. And I remember that I took mine and I whited them out and I put the social security on the bottom. Because if you start with, oh, hey, by the way, Jeff, what's your social? And we haven't even talked about your income, right? Then people right away are, oh, whoa, slow down. Like, I'm not ready for that yet. You know what?
Right.
Give me some more information, right? So what I did differently, even when I was a dialer, I would start with all about you and tell me more about you. Tell me about your house. Tell me about, your job. Oh, that's, and then you're building. And then in the end, once, you built enough rapport, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, what's your social? And usually people just gave it. Or if the ones that didn't, they're like, well, why do you need it? Oh, we just need to run your credit to make sure you're solid, just to finish up the application we just did.
Yeah, and you've already been on the phone for 20 minutes or whatever.
You've already built some trust up, right?
Yeah.
Versus you start with the social and everybody gets defensive, right? So it's things like that. And a lot of people don't realize the importance in flow and how the conversation goes. And too many people jump in too early to the close. Now, if you see the buying signals, like they're like, all right, well, what do you need to get started? Like, what do you need? My social? Oh, of course, go straight for the social. But if the buying signals are not there, like, don't go in for it. You're going in too early. So I think that has a lot to do with it when it comes to, online leads. We did a lot of Facebook marketing for a long period of time. I did it with a ton of different agents. We usually promote a certain product, and it was the same thing. It was, the whole call was about the product and let's tell us more about you to see if you qualify. Tell us more about your income. So again, by the end of the call, they've already given you so much information. The key is the feeling is that they started, not that they're just information gathering, right? One thing that you had said, the money's in the follow-up, right? Or something that regard.
The fortune's in the follow-up, yeah.
Fortune's in the follow-up. The one thing when it comes to prospecting that a lot of people miss is that anytime it's with a cold lead, right? And I think anybody that, unless they call you and say, hey, I heard great things about you. What do I need to do to get started? You work with somebody that I know. It's a cold lead. With any cold lead, you got to remember that as you're following up, in the beginning, they don't really know you, meaning that they're not going to give you, the time of day, just because they haven't established any sort of, hey, I know you, I respect you to some way, so I'm going to give you common courtesy, right? So you don't expect common courtesy in the beginning. Then as you continue to follow up, they're annoyed by you because they're like, wow, this person just doesn't quit. Like, I got stuff to do. I'm not, ready right now, whatever. They're annoyed, right? And then after some time, that annoyance changes to respect. They start respecting you and they're like, oh, this person's really persistent. They really actually care. And then after some time, they feel like they know you. And now you're at the stage, and I think that's what your company does very well when they nurture, is they go through that stages where then when they hand off that lead, they feel, the lead on the other end, that they already know you, that there's already a relationship there, there's already a trust level, because you've cast that vote of, I want your business, we're here, we care. And you've cast that vote for yourself constantly with the leads as you're calling them. And so too many people in our industry, it's like one call. Oh, the client never picked up. I left them a voicemail. They never called me back. I'm done. And that lead's garbage. Like, that person's closing with somebody, right? And the people that have figured out the unemotional side of, hey, this is just part of the process. And you might be in that annoying stage right now. And I know that doesn't sound attractive, right? But in reality, it's what works. And like, you're not going to change the game. You just got to play it for what it's worth and for the way it is. So,
man, I love that. Yeah, well put. And I'm glad that, when I mentioned the fortunes and the follow-up, that kind of sparked that concept for you, explained it very well. And I agree 100%. So that's why we took it in-house, because it's such a critical aspect of the conversion process for online leads. And when we did, the results increased for our clients tremendously. So then my clients stay longer, and it makes more sense, right, all around. So I'm curious now to talk about referrals and sphere of influence. So what systems do you have in place to increase the amount of referrals you're getting? And at some point in the earlier part of the conversation, you mentioned once you get to a certain level, it's really about retaining the referral partners and the strategic partnerships that you have, and then maybe adding one or two key ones a year. But really, at that point, you're kind of like retaining, preserving, because you have such good systems and such good momentum. So I'm really curious about your systems to generate more referrals, not only from strategic partnerships, which that's a whole different thread, but from clients. Like when a client closes, like then are they invited to do a review? Are you doing appreciation parties? Are you asking for referrals explicitly? Like what systems do you have in place to turn one transaction into 5 over the next 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it all starts with your client has to have had a phenomenal, time working with you, right? Like, that's key.
That's key.
People talk about, the book Raving Fans, and that book really goes deep into the difference, right? And I don't think anybody, when you look at that book, I don't know if there's a way to create what they really talk about, because it's so over the top. But the point is whatever industry you're in, your clients have to have had a phenomenal experience working with you, or at least 98% of them have to have had a great experience. If that's the case, then you've earned the right to ask for a referral, right? At that point, then it's up on you on staying really top of mind. So what we do is, there's 2 parts to it. One is we mail to everybody once. Let's just say this is what we do. Once month 1, we'll mail. Month 2, we do a video. Month 3, we mail. Month 4, we just go back and forth between video and mail. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to send them a weekly video, but we want to just be in front of them. And the reason why is because if they had a good experience, most people just forget who they worked with. No matter what you did for them, it's just life happens. Everybody's a narcissist these days, whether it's, it just depends on what level. The point is we have our own stuff to carry, to do than to remember who helped us. And some will, but most won't. And I think there was a study done a while ago that, the average person within 2 years, it's like 84% of people don't even remember the name of the realtor, right? It's the same thing as like the person you bought a car with. Like, do you really remember their name? You just don't, you forget. But the ones that stay in touch with you, you do. So the key is for me is just keep myself in front of them. All I want them to do is see a mailer, and this is by a mail. I want them to see it, touch it, and say, Oleg mortgage, toss, right? Because they're not in the market for the mortgage. So, but when they are, then it's like somebody says mortgage and they think Oleg. Why? Because I've been in front of them with a video or a mailer. And I know a lot of people don't believe in mailers these days, and that's fine. I think that mailers personally, when it comes to your own database, I think they're huge because it just keeps you in front of them, and people have to throw it away, right?
Right.
And I'm not expecting them to read it, but some do, and there's always a response rate on them. And if they know you, you're definitely gonna have an ROI on your, whatever you spent on the mailer. So one is that. Two is we have a CRM, Big Purple Dot, and we've built it out for my team. And we utilize, we have different campaigns that are text campaigns. They use text and voicemail. And pretty much the messaging, like for example, on their anniversary, it's me, voicemail, hey, Oleg here, just wanted to let you know, it's been 1 year since we closed. I know time goes by quick. Listen, just want to congratulate you. If there's anything that at all that me or the team could do for you or anybody that you know mortgage related, reach out to us. Otherwise, look, I know you're busy. You don't have to call me back. Just want to say happy anniversary. And we're here. We want to be your lender for life. If you ever are thinking about an investment property, buying in a different state, buying a second home, duplex, you let us know. We're here for you if you want to cash out of your home. And again, programming. Why would they reach out to you? And that's it. So then these are just hitting them randomly. And some people will call back and we'll chat. Other people will get the message. Again, I'm telling them you don't have to call me back because I don't want everybody to call me back. And I only want them to call me back when they need to. And I think that's another part to it. Is in addition to that marketing, you got to stay in front of them. So we do text campaigns, randomly and strategically after closing, and lots of videos, lots of mailers, and we don't do any client appreciation events, no parties, no any of that. I'm not trying to be friends with my clients. I just want to be their mortgage guy. That's it. Just want to be their mortgage guy. And what we've recognized is that from that, I've done about my career, probably about 6,000 loans, maybe 7,000 loans. And we market to everybody. And we typically, I'd probably say from our 800 transactions that we do a year, 400 of them are from past clients or past client referrals.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And I like your focus on making the clear decision. I just want to be their mortgage guy, right? Like I don't need to be their friend, throw these parties. I know that works really well for a lot of real estate brokers and mortgage loan officers. And they seem to have big personalities to match, right? That just like makes sense for them. But I like how you are clear about what makes sense for you and what works for you, and really doubling down and duplicating that. So now what I would love to learn is the single most important habit or action that you take on a daily basis that has attributed most to your success. This is more like an entrepreneur habit question. Do you have any type of routine or ritual that like really, since you've been 18 and you began this career in business, it's just really served you well? Does anything come to mind when I ask that question?
Yeah, it's constantly feeding your mind with business, personal development books, podcasts. At the end of the day, whether you're an athlete, whether you're in mortgage, real estate, you're in sales, like performance is everything. And your mindset drives the performance. How you feel about yourself on the inside, a lot of times will show on the outside. When you realize like, hey, we're all battling different things. With the salesperson compared to an athlete, they're taking shots, right? If you want to score, you got to shoot baskets, or for salespeople, it's making calls, right? If you want to score points, meaning close transactions, you got to make calls. And so, for me, it's been a big part. I would say the ritual is really being coached in some capacity, whether it's actually being coached by somebody or, being coached by the people that you're listening to. Like if people are listening on this podcast to this podcast, some of them are going to take a lot of that away and actually implement. Some people will hear it and nothing. Other people this will be the breakthrough for their next step because of some sort of a mental block that they've had. And I feel like that for me, the constant pursuit of my next stage has definitely been, what has continued to allow me to grow year over year over year.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That's something that has been the same for me. I was just listening to Jim Rohn's, Ultimate Library or whatever it is, this audiobook that I purchased, which was actually recommended from a guest of this podcast. And that, it's just another input and theme over the last 12 plus years since being at Cutco and buying into the fact that if I feed my mind, then my impact and my income are limitless. Like I can continue to grow, and there's a saying, once a mind once expanded cannot contract back to its original size. And I believe that once you get this input or this new idea, you continue to grow and expand, all of a sudden the things that used to be overwhelming are no longer a problem. And you have clarity, you have insight, you have a different perspective. I mean, the benefits are incredible. And Jim Rohn was just talking about it. I was just having a late lunch listening to it before this podcast. He said, I admire the 44 years that one of my dear friends put in from buying into the fact that you can personally develop yourself at 22. And then the guy passed away at 66, but built all these different companies and made all this impact and gave all this money back to charity. And, he transformed his life. And that's kind of the same as Jim Rohn's story. Like at 25, he met Mr. Schoaf, who then influenced him to start doing personal development. And within 6 years, from 25 to 31, Jim Rohn became a millionaire. And so it's one of those things where it takes a little bit of a constant foot on the gas mentality, which some are like, oh, I want to relax or do this or just watch TV and shut it off. But I really find that using Tony Robbins is another guy I look up to. Tony Robbins' concept of net time, no extra time. It's like when you're doing other things, when you're doing your morning routine, you're making coffee, you're cleaning up your dish after lunch or whatever. Just instead of silence and instead of the radio, put on a little personal development. Put on a little audio, put on just a little something to just get the gears turning, stay sharp, stay focused, and maybe learn something new or hear it a different way. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. It's been a critical aspect of my success as well.
Yep, I totally agree with that, man. I really do.
Awesome. So is there a question that I should have asked you or anything that you'd like to expand upon from earlier?
Yeah, one thing I would probably say too is, I'd want to touch a little bit on coaching. I think that at a very young age, I always felt like you want somebody in your corner that's done what you want to do, guiding you. And it doesn't have to be a professional company. It doesn't have to be anything like that. But, sometimes it's just somebody that is in your industry that's better than you and you saying, hey, I want to get to this level. You've done it. What do we need to do to make that happen? Like, how can I, be mentored by you? And you don't, whoever your mentor is, it doesn't mean they have to be your mentor for the rest of their life, right? But there could be a season where you're just really focused on, certain growth, whether it's building a team or generating leads or, just really sharpening your sales skills, right? And I feel like that's when, it's okay to ask for help. And I think the people that are strong ask for help. I think there's nothing that will slow you down like ego. And I think that, if you suck at something, know that everything is a learned skill. If you're not good at scripting and phone calls, there's thousands of books on scripting and phone calls. Like, you might have to take a year where you're going through, a book a week. But if you do that and you realize, again, just like a video game, you could sharpen your skills by, leveling up. It's the same thing with your sales skills. It's the same thing with your team building skills, with your leadership skills, like whatever it is, like take that and like make that be what, make that be your masterpiece for 9 months or a year or for a year and a half, where you're like, I'm going to learn how to be a better salesperson, how to ask better questions, how to go deeper into conversations, because that's where I'm struggling. Like if you notice, like, hey, you get on the phone and it gets awkward and weird because you don't know how to ask the right questions, like work on that. Like it's a clear hole in your business. And I think the more honest you are with yourself with what the holes are, the easier it is to fill them and fix them. And, I mean, it's crazy to think I've been in the business for, 17 years, got in when I was 18 years old. And I remember my first date, like it just flew by. And I know a lot of old people say that, like time flies and stuff. But I mean, if you're going to be in the industry for a long time, like start now, start today, sharpen your skills, be a better version of you. Don't think about the money. Like people get caught up with the money. Don't think about that. Think about being better, beating yourself today, being 1% better than you were yesterday. And that's that, that journey that a lot of people will tell you, once you hit that destination and you accomplished everything you want to accomplish, you're going to look back and you're going to say, the struggle was the beauty of it. That was the fun part, like the personal growth, that I had and everything. And that's what I would challenge anybody watching this is like, focus on the personal growth. Don't compare yourself to other people. Be inspired by other people, but don't compare yourself to other people, and know your holes and attack those.
Man, great advice. Really love that. Appreciate you sharing.
Yep.
So how can listeners contact you?
Well, if anybody needs a mortgage that's listening to this, we are licensed in 20 states now. OlegTkach.com is my website, just OlegTkach.com. My cell is kind of our team line, my office line. I have a couple people monitoring it. It's 425-478-7676. I am part of a coaching company known as the Core Training. We coach some of the top real estate agents and mortgage professionals in the country. It's very exclusive. It's sold out. We're not looking for new clients. That's not, I'm not trying to advertise for that or anything like that. But if somebody wants to look into the core and the systems and everything, there is content out there. So yeah, that's probably the best answer to that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having you on. Oleg Tkach, everyone. He is doing some big things up in Washington and, like you said, 20 other states that you and your team are licensed. And really appreciate you sharing not only your entrepreneurial secrets, but some of the nuts and bolts of lead conversion when it comes to the online leads that don't trust you. I mean, we covered so much. This is definitely worth a re-listen for any of you listening to this for the first time, because Oleg and I have been doing certain concepts that we explained for years. And if this is the first time listening or you had some insight, I highly recommend re-listening. It's just like rereading a book or re-listening to a podcast. It really helps you to understand and hear it a different way the next time. So really appreciate having you on, Oleg. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you want to accomplish your real estate goals, then I highly suggest downloading my free Ultimate Real Estate Goal Setting Framework. The link is in the description of the show, and it will help you break down your annual income goal into the amount of phone calls, appointments, or open houses you need in order to achieve that goal. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.